Good afternoon, welcome to UK Column Live. It's the 7th of November 2012 and it's just gone noon. Myself and Brian Gerrish are here in Plymouth as always. Good afternoon, Brian.
Good afternoon.
What's the weather doing, Brian?
The weather, from a quick look out the window, is cold and grey and dry. So this is the second dry Plymouth day in a row. So I think maybe that's encouraging. It means it could be raining tomorrow, of course.
Of course. So we're going to start with one of yours, or is it Mike's article first?
No, this is one we decided to go for because it is a serious article which has appeared in the Daily Mail today. It's the unfortunate story of a primary school head teacher, 43 years old, who was found hanged in her office after leading staff in a training day. And obviously a very, very sad incident, and our condolences go out to her family. But the reason that we have introduced this to a key part in the news is because still across the country there are a large number of suicides taking place, particularly with young people. Of course, Bridgend is one of the areas that's actually well known. Diagram on screen here just giving an indication of the spread of suicides in a geographical area for Bridgend. But in fact, the number of suicides is still continuing. And these suicide clusters are not just restricted to Bridgend in South Wales. They're occurring in other places in Britain. Aberdeen is one of them. And as yet, there is still no full investigation into the common theme of hanging as opposed to other types of suicide. Now, there is a well-known effect called the Werther effect, which is that if too much detail is given in suicide reports, people can copy. However, at the moment, it's quite clear that the government is not fully investigating what is causing suicide by hanging. And where the UK column has investigated with other members of the community in South Wales, we've actually been threatened and warned off from those investigations, including by local MPs who organised demonstrations outside the talks. So we're really flagging up for the audience today this very serious subject. And of course, we'll also just touch on the fact that suicides amongst police officers is also on the rise. And the slide that we've got on screen at the moment, we're just flagging up three of those reports. So there's a Sunday Mercury report of a police chief in a suicide blaze, a police officer connected with the Royal Moat Taser Company committed suicide, and there have been further suicides. But the point that we are making, and we have great concern about it, is the fact that we are seeing the increases in suicides in many cases after training involving behavioural change or neuro-linguistic programming has been used. And of course, across the police forces in England and Wales, and indeed in Scotland, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is absolutely embedded in the training, and we are now seeing an increase in suicides. Are these linked? That's the key question.
Heavy stuff.
Okay. We're moving on to Hugh Grant today. Of course, he's a man that many people remember for indiscretions in the back of a car, but he's now become a leading light in campaigning for open and transparent reporting in the press and media. And the Telegraph's picked up today on a very interesting story, which we're going to greatly expand. The Telegraph has said that Alan Cairns MP has great concerns over a Channel 4 Leveson documentary, which is going to be presented by Hugh Grant. And the MP says it's important to consider the inquiry objectively. If we just have a look at what the article itself said, Grant, the actor, has become the face of the Hacked Off campaign that is calling for a free and accountable media. The campaign was founded by the Media Standards Trust, which was until yesterday chaired by Roger Greif. Mr. Greif is also the chief executive of the production company behind the Channel 4 documentary Films of Record. Now, the key thing here is that there are a number of organisations which are behind Hugh Grant and around him, which have been heavily involved in calling for the investigation into the media. And we thought it would be interesting for our audience today to take a look in a bit more detail about this. So this is the main man at the centre of the MP's concerns. This is a shot taken from the Media Standards Trust website, and it says that on July the 26th, this man was appointed as acting chair. Now, this is an extremely interesting statement because, of course, the man that Mr. Grafe was replacing is Sir David Bell, who had simply stepped down temporarily from his chair of the Media Standards Trust to move across to actually head Leveson's panel investigating the press and media. Now, forgive me for saying this, but the moment he didn't fully step down from the Media Standards Trust, but basically temporarily stepped down, we've got the first question about the impartiality both of Sir David Bell and, of course, Lord Justice Leveson running the Leveson inquiry. This is the Hacked Off campaign, which of course was started with the full support and help from the Media Standards Trust itself. Media Standards Trust fully supported by Sir David Bell, Common Purpose trustee, and of course Julia Middleton, Common Purpose. Here is Hacked Off, a little campaign which seems to have amazing power. And on their website dated November the 3rd, they're attacking the Mail for actually pointing out some of the things going on around Hugh Grant. And I think if our viewers would care to go to the Hacked Off site, they might be very interested to see the sort of language that this little organisation is using. If we dig into this web a little bit more, we can probably add some clarification, although the whole thing is fairly murky. So the key personnel that we've got at the moment, Sir David Bell, who's top left of your screen, who is chair, or was chair until very recently, of the Media Standards Trust. He's been brought straight across to head up the Leveson panel, and of course he remains a Common Purpose chairman of trustees. We've got underneath him Hugh Grant, who's the man who's now being pushed forward to advise us on what the media should and should not do. And we can link both these men straight into the Media Standards Trust in the centre and the Hacked Off campaign, which is an offshoot of the Media Standards Trust. Now, to give an early indication of the tangled web between these people, at the top of the screen we've got a gentleman called Will Moy from an organisation called Full Fact, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But sitting next to him is Martin Moore, who's a director from the Media Standards Trust. And both these gentlemen had the opportunity to sit in front of Lord Justice Leveson, giving evidence on the state of the media and future requirements for the media. However, what they didn't do is fully declare their interest with the Media Standards Trust, and indeed their old chairman, Sir David Bell, who happened to be chairing the Leveson panel itself. On the right, of course, we've got a picture of Robert Grafe pointing out that he's temporary chair of the Media Standards Trust, while Sir David Bell is being independent in the Leveson inquiry. And the key bit is that here is now a film which is going to be made on Channel 4 and presented. And of course, Roger Grafe himself, not only a founding board member of Channel 4, but he's the chief executive of Films of Record. So the ordinary person in the street, I think, when fully faced with these facts, might say that there is a web of intrigue, but for free independent press reporting, this seems to be very serious. Yeah. The UK column did an article on Full Facts following some totally inaccurate reporting by that organisation on Roger Hayes, the chairman of the British Constitution Group, who was put through a secret court with no legal representation, no jury, no press, and no lay legal advice. However, when we reported that, Full Fact completely distorted the story and accused us of conspiracy theory. Well, I think our answer to that today is the evidence we're going to put on screen is nothing to do with theory, but certainly we're able to show that Full Fact is in the middle of a very tangled web. If we start off, this is the key. These three organisations, very tightly linked, the Media Standards Trust, the Hacked Off campaign, and the organisation Full Fact with Will Moy, who's given evidence for Leveson. And the key thing to look at is who is funding these organisations. And if we dig into most of these organisations, we find very big, powerful names, like the Rothschild family, Lord Sainsbury, but we also surprisingly find the Pearson Group, which is the very same organisation which Sir David Bell has been working for, or was working for many years. If we go a little bit further, of course, we find the Scott Trust, which is the organisation behind the Guardian newspaper, and perhaps it's no surprise that a Guardian newspaper is also fully forcing home the call for a major change of the monitoring of media standards, and of course the organisation sitting in the background to take over from the independent press organisation is the very same Media Standards Trust. The funding goes even deeper. If we look at the organisations funding Full Fact, we find that they're the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Nuffield and Esme Fairbairn, which are of course three of the very same organisations funding the Media Standards Trust. So if we bring in the two key people, we should remember that David Bell, Chairman of Common Purpose Trustees, still technically involved with the Media Standards Trust, although he's only stood down while he is acting independently as head of the panel for Leveson. It does bring a smile to your face, doesn't it? And we, of course, need to bring in Lord Leveson himself, who is claiming to be conducting an independent and unbiased inquiry into press standards. We would challenge this. We believe that this inquiry is fatally flawed, and we can tell listeners that members of the public who have called for Sir David Bell to stand down since he's compromised, their concerns have simply been brushed off by the Leveson legal team. So the picture does not look good for an independent press, remembering, of course, that Cameron appointed Lord Leveson in the first place, and it's David Cameron who's refusing to hand over emails to do with his relationship with Rebecca Brooks.
Yeah.
So what an interesting state of the media.
Can I just jump in, because Lord Leveson was also the one who apologised to Tony Blair when David Lawley Wakelin challenged him as well, didn't he? When Blair was up in front of the Leveson inquiry, and he apologised to Blair.
Well, it seems that everywhere you go, there is this mix of very powerful people and money, and what the UK column would like to put forward to viewers, and of course members of the mainstream media and press, is that there is a complete scam going on here, that the phone hacking saga has been ramped up in order to bring in full government control of the press. And of course the government is not going to do it in a clear, open way. What the government is actually doing is bringing these people in, and with them they bring a web of connections. So we've highlighted some of this on screen today. If you'd like to know more, please read the articles on Leveson, which are on the UK column website. And of course, do some research yourself. Don't just believe what we say.
Exactly.
Time for you to get in there a little bit.
Yes.
We're changing subjects here at the moment, so we're going to hop across to the Mirror.
Yeah. Yesterday, Theresa May was in the Commons talking about the investigation into sex abuse to do with Savile and to do with the North Wales Children's Home. But politicians aren't very happy. She's been accused of a child sex abuse cover-up after she snubbed the calls for a super inquiry, which look at the claims against some of the top Tories. But she's rejected pleas to merge the 8 different inquiries in wake of the Savile scandal into one big inquiry, and she claimed it would get in the way of police reinvestigating the care home abuse in North Wales. But she's really upset MP Tom Watson, and I quote him, he has said many sickening crimes will remain uninvestigated and some of the most despicable paedophiles will remain protected by the establishment that shielded them for 30 years. Theresa May replied and responded to the abuse coming to light is absolutely horrific, and she insisted the government is treating these allegations with the utmost seriousness. But why? My question is, why is she not investigating the whole amount? She just seems to be focusing on the Wales Children's Home.
Well, in my opinion, it would be that if you keep the investigations divided, then you can close them down and shut them off more easily. That's one point. The second point is, why is the whole matter not being put totally in the hands of the police? Because we can clearly see this isn't just a matter of children's home, this is a matter of paedophile rings, and the evidence out there on the internet and alternative media is already overwhelming that the people involved in these paedophile rings are people at high levels of government. They are clearly very wealthy people. So surely the right thing to do is to let the police off the leash, to investigate where they feel fit, and to investigate whoever they feel fit. Absolutely. I think this has the smell of a cover-up. Of course, if we just have a look at the Guardian here, having given them a little bit of a stick over their support for the Media Standards Trust, but of course the Guardian is now moving on apace to the fact that the child protection system is failing teenagers. So at the very time that we've got a very serious issue of paedophile rings operating, we've now got a blurring of the edges coming, that we've got the Guardian and other papers calling for changes to the protection system. But the evidence certainly that the UK column and other in-depth researchers like Bill Maloney from Pie and Mash Films, the evidence coming forward to us is that the public sector, the organisations who claim to be protecting families and children, are actually part of the trafficking and abuse rings themselves. So by starting to call for more power to be given to these organisations, certainly in my opinion, what we're actually seeing is the whole thing is being blurred. It's to do with people who are dead, it's to do with, well, they're just to do with media stars. Yeah. We don't want to get near who's in the politics. Yeah. And perhaps it's of interest, and we can just show this gentleman, Keith Bristow, so a senior police officer. He's worked with West Mercia Constabulary. 2002, he was promoted assistant chief constable, and then deputy chief constable of Warwickshire Police. He's due to also head up, there's a new department opening in 2013 called the National Crime Agency, yes, which he's due to become the head of. Yeah, so a very experienced police officer. We note that he's a common purpose leader, which is training that we've already pointed out is happening across police forces across the country. But he's also been intimately connected with the Association of Chief Police Officers, which we continually highlight to the audience is a private company, but setting policy for the police in UK. And of course, one of his colleagues is Sarah Thornton, the Chief Constable of Thames Valley Police, a police force which has absolutely refused to conduct a full and proper investigation into serious physical and sexual abuse at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College. And that is a college, of course, which sits on the doorstep of David Cameron's Witney constituency. and indeed family members of his election agent have responsibilities for child protection in that area. So very much as with Leveson, it seems to us that all is not clear in how these inquiries are being set up. But we do hope, of course, that Mr. Bristow is really going to leave no stone unturned to bring paedophiles to justice. And of course, it's been very encouraging to have mainstream press stating publicly that they believe mainstream press and media and alternative media should be working together on this.
Definitely.
So we wait to see what's going to happen. Nadine.
Yes, she's been suspended. The politician, Tory MP, who is going off to the jungle to star in I'm a Celebrity, has been suspended. Labour has branded the Tory MP shameless over her decision to appear on the show. Doris, who's paid nearly 66,000 a year as an MP, is going to rake in a maximum of an additional 40,000 for taking part in the show. Theresa May's comments were, frankly, I think an MP's job is in their constituency and in the House of Commons. So she wasn't slamming her too much, but I think she's made her thoughts perfectly clear. And really, that she's been suspended because she's off to the jungle.
It's quite extraordinary, isn't it, that this lady can be suspended fairly quickly because she's decided to go off to the jungle. But the Tory party has been amazingly slow in reacting when there have been accusations of paedophiles operating not only within Westminster but actually inside the party.
Well, absolutely, because surely they all know the names that Mr. Measham was going to name, the man who sentenced. So they must know the names. He's supposedly an acting politician, so why hasn't?
Well, it took the Mail yesterday to point out that names of senior politicians who are now being named by victims as involved in paedophile rings, those names are circulating on the web, but they are not being published. And of course, the cry is there's insufficient evidence. It appears to be a common theme that there's insufficient evidence whenever anybody of a status of politician or within the judiciary.
So should they not really be suspended, prior to, and while an investigation's going on, and they can be reinstated if they're in the clear? That's what you would think.
Personally, I think many people may say that Parliament should be recalled for a debate about what is actually going on. And it's been suggested to the UK column that far from using supposedly independent inquiries headed by yet another judge looking at these matters, that it's time to reinstate grand juries and allow full and proper panels of the general public to decide what is going on. Yeah. So I think there's an arrogance in the way these things are handled. Now, has this lady been suspended as a smokescreen to keep us distracted from what's really important in Parliament? But it seems to me double standards. Totally. If you go to the jungle, you're going to be suspended quite quickly. If you're involved in a little bit of paedophilia, well, you can stay in the background protected for as long as possible. It's hypocrisy.
Isn't it just? Not very nice.
Financial matters.
Oh, yes. Just a quick whiz over this. The bureaucrats apparently have wasted billions of pounds through fraud and blunders last year, which the EU's own auditors have revealed last night. 89 billion spending during 2011, and for the 18th year in a row they refused to sign off the EU's annual accounts. The European Court of Auditors confirmed that the level of fraud and blunder was getting worse. The report said that the error rate in the EU spending rose up 3.9% last year from 3.7% in 2010 to 7.7% now. I just want to give a few figures on how, apparently, according to the Express, they wasted our money. More than 160,000 was paid to a scheme in Lombardy, Italy, to build a farm with a lab for processing and a terrace for drying fruit. It found out to be a private dwelling. An aid agency paid 4 million to itself for technical assistance. A farmer was granted a special premium for 150 sheep. The auditors found out that he had no sheep. Italy and Spain farmers were paid for keeping permanent pasture, and when auditors turned up there, it turned out to be dense forests. And a farmer paid to carry out appropriate orchard management techniques failed to even prune any of his trees.
Well,
I just wanted to highlight the corruption, really, within the EU now.
It is corruption, but isn't it interesting that the examples they choose are, again, of people at the bottom of the... We're not talking about major EU funding projects. We're talking about little farmers who've been making a little bit on the side. But, of course, the key point is that David Cameron and George Osborne are giving British taxpayers money to an organisation which does not have any full and proper signed off accounts. So they're giving British taxpayers money, public money, into a fraudulent organisation. That is malfeasance in public office, which is a criminal offence. So we have another issue at the moment, that whilst the massive cuts are being carried out at home because we have no money, Mr Cameron, George Osborne, and indeed the rest of Westminster supporting these men are happy to give money away to quite clearly a criminal organisation.
Absolutely.
Of course, we can't be sure of the amount of money being quoted here, well, 3.7%, because if there's no signed off accounts, then of course there's no proper information in the first place. So if you're feeling angry about that, perhaps it's a good time to pick up the telephone or pen or get clicking on an email to your MP to ask just why your taxes are being handed over to a foreign criminal organisation. I suspect there'll be some emails about that. We've got another subject on Syria. The Mail's picked up on this, and the headline is Cameron is hinting at arming the Syrian rebellion in a major escalation of British involvement in civil war. So this is David Cameron, who was happy to tell fellow MPs.
I think Mike wants to butt in.
On passing a map that he'd already invaded Libya, and where should he go next? That was reported in the mainstream press. So Mike, what have you got to tell us on this one?
Well, what's interesting is that Cameron is on a 3-day trip to the Middle East, and we know that he's trying to sell arms to lots of Middle Eastern countries. Apparently he was on the Syrian border yesterday to meet with Jordanian troops and see the sights, and unfortunately nobody in Syria managed to fire off anything in his direction. But anyway, Britain apparently is open to talks with gunmen, according to the Daily Mail, and this was the key phrase that I wanted to highlight out of this article. I recommend people read it. The Mail is saying Britain is open to talks with gunmen seeking to overthrow Syrian dictator. Well, the definition of a gunman, or the similarity between the term gunman, it sort of hints at terrorist.
Yeah.
And just like we're funding the European Union, which never has any signed off accounts, and it's full of corruption and theft and this kind of thing, Britain is now giving money, and we've highlighted this before, to terrorist organisations and gunmen. And for those of us who are paying tax, we should remember, as highlighted by Tony Farrell and others, we should remember that it is actually unlawful for us to contribute to any organisation which is contributing money to terrorism, and that does not exclude the British government. So the British government is contributing money to terrorism. We should not be paying our taxes under those circumstances, because we are committing an offence to do so. But the other thing that out of the Mail article that I wanted to highlight was that the Prime Minister said that, quote, it could be arranged, unquote, for Bashar al-Assad to flee. And basically this is a threat against another head of state. Leave the country or we'll do to you what we did to Gaddafi. And so there are two very interesting statements in that article, and I recommend people read it.
And of course, probably what we should add to that is that if we have a look at Cameron's performance as managing Britain, he's got one fairly serious job, which is to look after Britain as Prime Minister. He's clearly failing dramatically, and yet here is this man who is who's got unbelievable self-confidence that he's now going overseas to point out how somebody else should run their country. But of course, is Mr. Cameron simply following conservative politics, or is he actually the puppet for the international banking cartel who are really pulling his strings? We'll leave you to think about that.
Drones, yeah, just again briefly, Tory MP for Gillingham, Mr. I can't pronounce his name, Kisty, spoke at Westminster Hall yesterday over his concern at the use of drones in Afghanistan. It's looking like there's an estimate of 885 innocent people so far have lost their lives due to drone attacks just in Pakistan. Mr. Christie has raised questions about allegations that the UK government has passed over intelligence to the United States for drone attacks in Pakistan, which have claimed lives of hundreds of civilians. Meanwhile, Drone Campaign Network has launched an online petition dubbed David Cameron to end the secrecy surrounding the use of British drones, demanding an end to the UK government's secrecy surrounding the drones in Afghanistan. And last month, the British High Court was told that the country's assistance in the US assassination drone strikes in Pakistan may involve acts of encouraging murder or war crimes. But we are still looking at using them.
Yeah. Well, the thing about these weapon systems is that they are becoming increasingly powerful. And the thing which I find very worrying indeed, of course, is fewer and fewer people are required in order to launch them and handle them, which means that we are not getting people on the ground in our own armed forces to have any concerns about what's going on. And of course, the British public have very little, if any, idea where these things are being deployed, what they are being used for, why, and what the casualties are. So it's a frightening scenario that we have a situation at the moment where there's no full and proper debate in Westminster over matters as serious as Syria, for example, and yet we're now deploying these weapon systems without the British public having any real knowledge of who we are killing and maiming.
It's just like video games.
Video games for David Cameron. And of course, sorry to just keep pushing there, Lou, but there are several articles now in the mainstream press which I think are suggesting that Mr. Cameron likes to relax by playing computer games.
So I wonder if he's really behind the decks.
Well, that's a frightening thought.
Isn't it, John?
The taxman.
Yes, we've touched on it for a few times over the last week, and we mentioned Lynn Homer yesterday, who is head of Revenue and Customs and who isn't charging the big corporations the tax or chasing up the tax that they should be paying. But apparently she's now said the government's actually powerless to stop the multinationals like Starbucks, Google, for paying any more tax. And that's what she said. She's totally powerless. But next week, senior executives from Starbucks are due to face MPs at the Commons to explain why they've only paid 8.5 million in corporation tax, despite taking in 3 billion in sales in just the UK. Well, some Labour MPs and Tory MPs aren't too happy with her. The Labour MP Austin Mitchell has says, "You go easy on the big boys, you go harder on the companies that can't leave and have to pay their taxes here," he alleged. "You are handling the big corporations more gently, more kindly and generously than you are small British enterprises that can't move their affairs to a tax haven." This was an attack on Miss Homer. And Richard Bacon, who is the Deputy Chair of the Public Accounts Committee, has said it smells and it doesn't smell of coffee. Right. It smells very bad. Miss Homer has denied all of the above.
Well, yeah, we've commented on Miss Homer's track record of disaster wherever she's been, so perhaps we shouldn't be surprised. But really what we're being told here is that the big corporations can do as they like.
We've got more power than the government, really.
We don't have a government because Costa Coffee can tell the government what to do. So I think part of this is actually nudging. It's a psychological exercise by the government to get us used to the idea that these massive global corporations can tell us what to do. And this is a distraction from the reality If the British government can't control what goes on in our borders, then effectively we don't have a government. We're being governed by the international banking cartel and the global companies.
I'd just like to bring in these figures. Last year, Google paid 6 million in tax on a turnover of 395 million. Apple is thought to be paying 14.4 million in tax on more than £1 billion of sales. And it's been claimed a more realistic tax bill, £1 billion they earned last year and only got charged 14.4 million.
Yeah.
And the government can't do anything.
We need to look deeper. And again, if you feel you want to do something about it, speak out, tell other people. And it's really time that the British public started to say, no, we're not having this.
Absolutely.
If we can encourage that. Mike, I think you've got the final slot today, which is to have a look at house prices.
Another article in the Mail telling us that it's going to be another 12 years for house prices to recover to pre-crisis levels. And the first question in my mind is, why would we want them to do so? Look, we're busy criticising the banks for their speculative activity, but actually the majority of us in this country have been behaving just as badly with regard to house prices. We've been chasing ever higher and higher house prices. We've got to the point now where the market cannot support first-time buyers, and the banks are so collapsed that they can't provide finance for future loans. So there is no possibility of any improvement if you want to see house prices going up. And the bottom line here is that while interest rates are low, as they are, while the Bank of England maintains interest rates low, there is no pressure on house prices to actually come down. So they are just trickling down by, £1,000 less in October than they were in September. Well, big deal. It's going to be when, we know that the inflation figures are fixed. We understand how they're being fixed. So it's going to be when inflation gets to the point that the Bank of England has to take action. They're going to put interest rates up. The banks are not going to maintain. They're going to maintain a gap between the base rate and the mortgage rate, because they're trying to recapitalise themselves by whereas there might have been in the past a 0.5% or 1% difference between the base rate and the mortgage rate. Now there's a 5 or 6% difference between the base rate and the mortgage rate. So that's going to be maintained. So the Bank of England sticks interest rates up to 3 or 4%, which it may be forced to do in the not too distant future. We're going to see mortgage rates going up towards 7, 8, 9, 10%. People are going to start to really hurt at that point, and we're going to see people wanting to get rid of their properties in order to pay off loans, or there's going to be a rise in repossessions. So, this is a serious situation with mortgages in this country. It's an accident which is just waiting to happen. People need to be aware of that. And house prices, two questions. Why would we want the house prices back up to pre-crisis levels? That's the main point, really. So.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike. We've got no news show tomorrow. We've got a 2-hour special, but we won't be having a news show. Brian will have Patrick Henningson here in the studio, and I believe an exclusive interview.
We're going to be covering child issues. We still believe that this is absolutely fundamental to getting the lid off what's really happening in this country. So Patrick's going to be talking about his experiences of trying to expose what's been happening with paedophile rings. And we're also going to have an exclusive interview with Robert Green and talking about the Holly Gregg abuse case. And we're going to be putting this into context to say what is really happening in this country at the moment to do with children, abuse of children, and the protection of children. For those of you who are not aware, you might like to do a little bit of research to see the vote that's coming up in Ireland on the 11th of November. It might be the 10th, so check me on that one. But essentially, at the moment, there is a massive propaganda campaign in Ireland effectively to get parents to hand over the real protection of their children to the state. This is a very, very frightening scenario, and in the background we think the same thing's happening here. So do join us for what promises to be a very hot show at 2 o'clock tomorrow.
2 o'clock on TNS and obviously on the UK Column website. And if you're liking what everybody at the UK Column are doing, please subscribe. Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us.